All right, it's 2 minutes after, so we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, and from morning for me here, at least in Kentucky. I'm coming to you today from Lexington, Kentucky. I'm Jamie Justice. I'm the Director of Education US and Global Innovation here at Eon Reality. And I'm going to share a little bit about my background in a moment as we get started. I think there may be some context to the discussion that I wish to have with you today. But first, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. It's a beautiful day here, a little overcast, but hopefully wherever you are, and I see that we have people from all over the world with me this morning to talk about how we can create new learning experiences using the XR platform, in our case, but primarily the field of XR as this knowledge metaverse continues to grow and expand. So today we're going to focus a little bit on that. So to begin, I'm going to go back here to my slides page and talk with you first of all about what our agenda is going to be. It's going to be very informal, and I'm going to share with you some ideas and some thoughts that I've had over the years as I think about my time in following the virtual reality, augmented reality aspects of things, looking into how it could impact and improve the teaching and learning process. And why I thought I would share a little bit about my history is that there's some context. I've had some opportunities and some experiences that have been unique in this area, and I brought those with me, I guess, when it came to Eon. And so first off, a little bit of background for me is that beginning around March of 2002 is what I always like to credit my time for looking at virtual reality and how I can improve the way people learn, was when I was in the Kentucky Community Technical College system. And we spent a lot of time over the years of looking at different approaches with different companies, different things that could happen. All these ideas, I like to call them random acts of progress that lead to change and to being able to use virtual reality, augmented reality in unique ways. But it wasn't until around 2020 that I had an aha moment, and I realized that all the things that we had talked about in the past and were trying to accomplish but never made it mainstream. We're not really ready yet. But around 2020, I had an aha moment when I created an application in front of a class, demonstrated it, shared it with all the students, and then went back to the back of the room and put on a HTC Vive headset, and it had that same experience that I just created on just an object in that environment. And from that point on, I see a difference now here in 2022. Where we can pull all this together in unique and creative ways to make lessons that are learning experiences, really more so than lessons, I like to think, that can help people learn more rapidly. We like to say at Eon, we like to learn, train, perform, and collaborate as we work together to come up with new ways to use this technology to improve the learning process. So my goal today is to spend a few minutes sharing some ideas. I'm not saying they're good ideas or bad ideas, but they're ideas that you can use when you look at building content for students to use, or how you work with students where they use the platform to create their own content and so forth. So we're going to take a moment here and we're going to do a little situation analysis in our introduction. We're going to do an approach of a quick look at learning and crosswalking. And I think that's a very important piece of this whole thing of using XR in the curriculum, in the teaching and learning process. And then lastly, I'll call them a few concepts, but how to create a compelling learning experience using XR. We're going to take a look at a few of those tips and tricks and ideas. Maybe you can go from not thinking enough about what you're creating to overthinking, and it's trying to find that right balance. And it's trying to find those places where this content really fits to improve the learning that takes place. So that said, just one more little thing about my background, just for curiosity's sake, I guess. I do come from out of the Kentucky Community and Technical College system, where I served as Director of Visualized Learning and Innovation, Director of Technical Education, Workforce Development, and a lot of varied and sundry roles, which gave me a lot of unique experiences. Prior to that, I was in the Kentucky Department of Education, and I was also a secondary school teacher teaching technology education here in Lexington and other activities of private business and so forth. So I've had a lot of opportunities in the last 40 years to do some unique things. All right, that said, let's go ahead and dive into the agenda and let's take a look at where we are and where we want to go. So the question that I ask here in this first scene is, how do you get from here? I'm not saying that this is bad or that it's good or whatever. It's just this is our current model you often see in many colleges and universities where we have this kind of participation. But you notice the difference now is that you see a lot of computers on desks, which perhaps maybe you didn't before. But how do we go from here to here, which is immersive learning experiences, group projects, virtual reality, augmented reality, overlays using merged XR types of experiences where we blend all these types of learning experiences in unique and different ways. So how do we go from that traditional classroom model to using XR, extended reality, to change the way that people learn and the way that we ultimately really facilitate learning? And that's one of our major goals, I think, is how you facilitate learning in such a way that students take ownership of their own learning, their experience. So I also ask the question, how do you get from here, which is a lot of traditional planning, and just a lot of in-depth thoughts and guidance, and how do you take ideas that you build to go from your paper planning or from books or the other information that you have, your existing curriculum, to here, again, that immersive set of environments of virtual lab experiences or virtual experiences around objects or spatial meetings or blended activities using head mount displays or perhaps just an augmented type of experience. And so to that end, I want to ask a question, and as we look at creating these new experiences and talk about this knowledge metaverse and what happens in the knowledge metaverse. And so primarily I've thought about this a lot, how the design looks and how it lays together. And primarily, I think it all comes under this kind of bucket type of system or funnel type of system, that the first thing that needs to occur really before you jump into this totally is just do some curriculum alignment. It doesn't have to be super in depth, but it can be in depth. I mean, it's again, finding your own balance of what's important to you to make sure that you're covering, the content that needs to be covered and that you are facilitating the learning that needs to occur. And so the first thing that you should do, and we'll talk a little bit more about this first one of curriculum alignment, but is aligning and finding those places where the technology fits. And if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, we don't force it because we have the cool tools. We want to find those places where we use this technology to really help students jump forward and to be more successful in their learning and to learn more rapidly and to be able to perform and to train as they work through the process. And so curriculum alignment is a very important piece of that. And it has to do with the integration of XR knowledge and metaverse into your curriculum to increase, number one, engagement is the primary reason for using it, attainment and success for all learners. So once you've done some curriculum alignment, you can start thinking about what learning experiences are that you want to offer. This is a collection of all types of knowledge metaverse experiences such as Eon XR, Merged XR, spatial meetings just around objects and using the platform, interactive lessons that multiple students create, research, and some topics and things we're going to look at a little bit later. All right. So after you've identified the experiences that you want to use, and if you're here with us today, I'm going to assume that you probably already have the platform and have perhaps been using it to some degree already. And maybe we're stepping back behind where you are as far as, the process for integrating and using it. So this may be helpful as you kind of go back a step and think about, now that I understand what it is, how do I align it to my curriculum and use it? So once you think about the experiences, there are 4 buckets underneath of that we can talk to. One is XR lessons, XR assignments, XR student tasks, and perhaps XR student competitions. And you can add your own categories underneath this. I really think that after all the years that I've been with this, that we're just now starting to scratch the surface of what's really possible using XR as a teaching and learning tool. And by that, I mean, there's all kinds of assets, there's all kinds of tools out there, things that we can use, especially in the XR platform from Eon. But the fact that we can finally use these things in unique ways and creative ways, it now opens the door for a new way of faculty-led creativity to look at how we approach the lessons and how those lessons should be delivered and how the lessons should be experienced. And so when I think about it from the term of lessons, I think it's not so much lesson, it's an experience. And this experience changes the way someone learns. So looking at lessons, what I call lessons, those are the ones that I think you would create as a faculty member. Those are ones that you create and the student consumes and they use and they have some experience with it, whether they access it from the platform directly or from a link that you send or you link it from a learning management system. After you've identified lessons that are faculty created and delivered, then we think about XR assignments. And this really is where the door begins to open wide for students to use and learn with the platform, because now we're putting that power in their hands. And we're giving them an assignment to create some content using their phone or their iPad or their computer. And there's a whole background of that that's also very exciting and very powerful. Those are student-created assignments or student-created learning activities that help develop critical thinking and problem solving to complete a personal project for review and for submission to your faculty, to trainers, or to other instructors. And assignments can be individualized or grouped. So what I mean by all that is that I can hand an assignment to every single member in the class there to do this assignment, or I can do it in groups where they do an experience. And we're going to explore this a little bit later when we get into concepts. But this is a great reinforcement of learning because it provides for hands-on experiences. It provides for a mashup of experiences from both creating content and researching content, delivering that in a lesson or a training or other meeting type of format that can really change the way that they learn. All right, and student tasks is a collection of learning activities to be completed by students as part of a larger assignment. So these are just little task sheets that you can create, for a little analog mixed with the digital, but, you can give them an assignment sheet that they're just to take one topic and look at an asset and identify everything they can about it on the fly or some unique approach to using something. Tasks may be launched from a learning management system directly into the platform. So what I mean by that is you're introducing a new topic. You may put in your learning management system a brief link to a lesson that you've created, and students seamlessly go from the learning management system to that lesson. They complete it, they come back, and then they move on to the next phase of their learning inside of the learning management. And then lastly, to increase awareness, student competitions on content design and development as tasks. Maybe you can do this through things like hackathons or summer camps or student organizations or other activities. And some of this I'll share in a moment about where my past came from in using some of these approaches over the years. And I see now where they have a possibility to work with us. All right, so for right now, we've looked at that bucket, and I'll share a document that will be placed in the resources center that will encompass a lot of this information. And of course, the slide presentation will be available along with these models that I'm sharing with you today. So as we think about integrating the XR Metaverse into the curriculum, I want to take just a moment, and if you would be so kind, and if you have a piece of paper or a computer screen where you can type or whatever, I'd like for you to maybe take 2 minutes and list as many challenges as you can that affect student success in your area, in your field of study, in whatever that may be. And just kind of quickly, just maybe jot down as many as you can in the next 45 seconds of challenges that you would like to address and hope that maybe XR will help you solve those challenges. So let's take, I'll be quiet for just a moment, and let's take that 30 to 45 seconds to list those challenges somewhere on your own. You can even share those in the chat window if you would like to do so. And we'll use this as a building point for the rest of our discussion. Let's take another few seconds, and then we'll move on with our discussion. okay, you can continue to think about that on your own. And again, this is for your own use. But basically, what I wanted to do was just take that moment to pause and let's just slow down for a second and think about, how we can use XR to solve the problems that I'm facing on a day-to-day basis as a faculty member, as a teacher, as an instructor, as a corporate trainer, whatever my role may be in using the platform. And as I think about that now, I've refocused my attention to things that I could maybe do that would be different to solve the problem that I have. Now, we could go a little deeper with situation analysis. It's part of an innovation think tank that I've run in the past. But when you think about, these challenges, why do you have those challenges? What are the competition things that you're up against, and how to get students engaged in the instructional process and in the learning process? How do you facilitate learning to solve that problem? What are some things that you could do differently that could make things more effective, more user-friendly, more engaging for the students who are there? So keep building on this task all the time of situation analysis, and think about where you are and where do you go from here. And as you start thinking about that, you'll start looking at problems maybe a little differently, start thinking differently about how you design the content and the instruction that you use. There is no panacea for education. There's no one thing that solves all of the problems, but there are lots of things that we can pull together that can certainly make an impact and that can lead us to where we strive to be as educators, to improve the learning and the experience for the students that we serve. So keep that list in mind, and let's begin now and taking a little bit deeper dive into some of the tasks that you can do before you start planning. So now hopefully you've thought of something that you'd like to solve. Let's take a look at your curriculum. And this is that place where you take the time that it takes to find those fits, those things, those places where XR could really be that breakthrough event to help students learn faster, perform better, to learn, train, perform, as we like to say here at EON. And so one of the things you do in a curriculum crosswalk is, first of all, you identify challenges. You look at your curriculum, you maybe look at your assessment information, you look at your outcomes, and think, well, am I really happy with where things are, or could they be better? And I have a challenge. There's one group of students I can't seem to reach. Their minds are in different places than where mine is. Their understanding, their experiences, and so forth, whatever those factors may be. But take the time, just like we did with that situation analysis, to step back for a moment and try to figure out, what are those challenges that I need to solve? What are those real things that I need to do that can make my teaching experience more effective and make the things that I'm trying to do with students more exciting and more engaging? Also, when you curriculum crosswalk, and I'm sure I'm talking to the choir, you find learning gaps. You find those things that we're not doing as well in this area as we are in this area. I would really like to try to drive up that learning. How can I use XR to solve that problem? You identify lessons for content for XR. Learning experiences, I think, is still probably the better term. And now we start to look at your curriculum and you think, well, I've got to cover these objectives and I've got to cover this content, but where would XR really work? Where would it really make a difference in my teaching? So you start now looking for those places where it really makes sense. And then you begin to think about, maybe if I use XR in this way, if I place this in my learning management system and they go to this lesson, complete it, and then come back to the other lesson that I'm teaching, it brings a new linkage. It brings a hands-on experience. It brings some other aspect or role to my teaching. And again, everything I'm talking about today is personal to you. It is how you see it. And so I'm trying to lead this in such a way that you begin asking the questions yourself. And you find that place where this really fits for you. It's not a one size fits all. We find those places where it links. And then as you start thinking about lessons, you think about the student role and expectations. Do they consume the lesson, or do they create the learning experience? Do they share their experience with their classmates, or do they present it only to you? Do they, do some other type of activity with it that maybe we haven't even thought of yet, but the platform enables you to do? And then lastly, and I think probably the most important, is that you think of the learner outcomes. Before you create any learning experience, the first thing you should think of is, what should someone know or be able to do as a result of completing this lesson and this learning? So that's why we curriculum crosswalk. And it can be really in depth. I mean, it depends on how your temperaments are for things, or it can be very iterative in that you can do it on the fly. But again, the fact that you take a few moments first to think about where and how I want to use this is very important. And I think it will assure you more success in the future if you have a good game plan for where you want to use XR. We're not just using it because we have this really cool set of tools. We're using it because this really cool set of tools can make a difference in the way people learn and perform. All right, so one more little look at curriculum crosswalking. And what I mean by that, you can look at here in the U.S., we talk about career pathways in my background and experience. And those career pathways, could be transportation, manufacturing, construction, medicine, any one of the broader topic areas. And then you think about what programs come into those topics. What courses do you teach? What standards do you need to adhere to? Is there a national skill standard? Is there a state standard? Is there a field of study standard that needs to be adhered to? And then what are the learner outcomes from those programs? And the document that I'm showing here on the left, and it's of course very small print, is a tool that we can share with you that we've created to help you to kind of do that crosswalk, where you can begin looking more closely at what you teach, finding those skills gaps that you want to look at, or maybe you're teaching a welding class, and I always, for whatever reason, I like to choose welding. My background is woodworking, but if you're teaching a welding class and you want to introduce how to use an oxyacetylene welding tank, and you know that we're online for some reason, and students at home do not have access to an oxyacetylene system, so you could use a 3D asset, create a lesson or a learning experience in Eon XR, share that with your students in real time, and wherever they are, whenever they are, they can get an experience around oxyacetylene tanks, at least as far as what the parts are, the safety rules, maintenance, and any number of other tasks that you want to identify. So this curriculum crosswalking grid allows you to start chunking down the curriculum to those smallest bites that can be used to help you find a successful place where this really makes sense to integrate XR into that curriculum. And from that review on the left side in the yellow colors, you see the two high-level topics and potential XR lessons. From this simple step of crosswalking, you begin to see areas like, gas metal welding and you use oxyacetylene, and then you can think about, I want to do a lesson on torches. I want to do a lesson on the lab experiences you see in the image that I show here. What do I need to know to work in this field? And so suddenly ideas hopefully come to you of ways that you can teach inside of the platform to use this to enhance and improve instruction. So back to our original list, once you do the curriculum alignment and crosswalking, now you have a good idea of hopefully multiple places where you can use XR in the curriculum to enhance and improve that teaching and learning process. All right, I'm just taking a quick look. And the two questions that I have so far, one is that it is being recorded, and we will be sharing that with you shortly after the seminar is completed or the workshop is completed. And also, okay, we can work with you on getting the licenses. We can do a contact with you later on if you will just send me an email at jamie.justice@eonreality.com. I can connect you with someone. All right, thank you. And be sure to throw in any questions that you may have. I do appreciate that very much. All right, so we look now at curriculum alignment. And so now let's take a closer look at some other aspects of this. So what to think about, how do you create compelling learning experiences? And there are 5 things I thought of that you want to take a look at. And that is, there's maybe, and there's more than 5, obviously. These are just some things that I thought about in the last little bit. Honestly, I have been thinking about this a lot, probably my whole career, but in the last few months, I've really been thinking about how we can use this platform more effectively to engage students. And so there's been a lot of stuff I've looked at, and I've really been kind of deep, maybe too deep in some ways, but you'll see where I'm going here in a few moments. So these are just 5 ideas. They're not good ideas or bad ideas. They are ideas that you can take a look at and things to consider as you start creating these compelling learning experiences. I think it's more than lessons. It's a learning experience. Because think of it this way, if your students leave your class and they just took a lesson and they have to remember some things, that's great. They completed a lesson. But if they left your class talking about the experience they just had of how they learned something, that means that that learning is continuing beyond your classroom experience. And that's why I think experiences are better topics than as lessons in and of themselves, even though they are quote unquote lessons. All right, so 5 considerations before I ramble too much here. Our assets, that's the purpose and the focus of the digital asset that you use. Digital twins for real world learning. And that one is one of the most exciting ones that have come on yet to me, and how we can blend these two worlds together. And we'll talk about that for just a moment. What I'll call 360 learning, where we use 360 assets in unique ways to take students way beyond where they are located in the world, wherever they are, whenever they are. And I really totally believe in student-created assignments and tasks as a great way to use this platform. And then the last one is an acronym that I thought about that it's called IMPACT. And we'll talk about that one a little bit more as we go forward. But I thought, sometimes it's easier to think about things in terms of acronyms and words. And I always grin when I say that. I had a close colleague that I worked with in the past. I called her my acronymologist because she could always come up with an acronym. But it does help organize your content as you work through the process of planning and doing lessons. All right. So one other comment I had was a question about does the tool offer topics in the humanities? And I think that's a good question leading into this first discussion that I have about assets. And so to me, I've seen applications in those fields that people come up with, and it's all about your own creative use of the content. So you don't let the asset that you're using, the 3D model or the image, but be the driving force of the curriculum learning, but let that be a tool to help facilitate bigger discussions. So you could maybe teach something on mental health using a lesson on just animal life or something, just something unique, whatever it could be. And that maybe I didn't come up with a good analogy there, but to look at things that you can do in a different way to change the normal way of thinking and to spur some other discussions and comments. And we'll see if we can get to that in a little bit more too. So anyway, I want to continue on here, and I'll continue to come back to some specific questions towards the end. So let's first take a look at assets. And to me, when I look at the platform, we have that it's not a matter exactly of finding assets. I mean, we have assets in our library itself. We have assets here in the marketplace, both 3D and 360. We have premium assets that you can pull from the marketplace. We have Sketchfab linkages. You can bring in assets from your own creation, conversion of CAD files, other sites you purchase and find models and content. So it's not the question of finding the asset. The challenge is choosing the best asset for its intended purpose. I had here an example of designing your brain in the areas and functions of the brain. So sure, you can find brain asset models all day long. There's all kinds of things out there that you can find, but it's how you want to use that asset. It's what do you want to design around it? How can you do something differently? And so the innovator side of me comes back and always has the question we ask, why? Why would we do this? Why would we do it this way? Just keep building questions and then have lessons that are created that drive more of that questioning to help lead students to think more deeply about the content than just what you see in the asset itself. In some cases, the asset is perfect. We need to have an asset on a particular model, whether it's the brain, the heart, or whether it's the welding tools or woodworking tools or automotive tools or technical equipment, IT equipment, whatever it may be. So the asset is extremely important because it's the center focal point of creating your content, whether you're doing a digital twin, a spatial meeting, or a standard XR learning experience that you can play in an environment. So there's all kinds of creative ways to use it. And I can give you a couple of examples, and let me continue on, and then I will come back and we'll think about that just a little bit more. Hopefully that will come up in the next part of the discussion. So, for example, when you think about when you want to build a lesson and you've done your curriculum crosswalk and you're thinking of areas that you want to do, now you start thinking about what assets do I want to use to teach from. Again, This can be something that you do on the fly, very iterative, very quick process where you can build something just, as you see a model, you say, oh, that's perfect. I can use this and I can do it. Or it can be something that you could really think out and build a whole big learning plan around just one single asset. That's what is so amazing to me about where we are now with the XR capabilities. In the past, you had to know how to code, you had to know how to do, modeling and so forth to really build these complex simulations. Whereas now you can take a different approach and use an asset as a way to make that work. So let's think about this way. So first of all, when you choose the asset, think about what's the purpose. What is the purpose of it? Is it specific? Do I want to teach someone about the parts, the components, safety rules, other information that it's relevant to the specific content in that asset? In that case, it might be important to me to find an asset that is extremely accurate. And also, like I say, do not get hung up on the accuracy of the asset. Think about its purpose and how it's going to be driven later. In a virtual world, it is a virtual world. It's not the real world. Somewhere you have to make the transition from a virtual experience to the real world experience. So when you look at the assets, a lot of people get hung up on it that model's perfect, but it's missing this one piece. Or this asset is great, but I'd like it to have more. And maybe you can add more, maybe you can find more, and there's ways to do some of that. But don't overthink the asset itself at the same time as you overthink it, maybe, as I contradict myself here. But anyway, think about the purpose of the asset. Is it specifics? Is it how to do something? But is it conceptual or is it theoretical? And I just saw one recently from one of our colleagues at Alamo College who used the platform with a learning management system to do an escape room kind of process. And they used 4 or 5 different assets, 4 or 5 different applications, but in that were quiz questions. And that once the students completed each process, it gave them a set of letters that became keys that they could go to the next level of the lesson. I thought that was extremely creative. And so we start thinking differently about, how we want to use this content to engage students and to make them think differently about the world around them. That's where we're facilitating learning. So when we find those gaps, we find those places that we want to work on, think creatively about the type of asset you need to use and that you want to use, and that which one brings the most importance. Okay, so that said, we go to realism. And I already talked about that just a little bit. So how important is it to be extremely realistic? If I'm teaching someone how to do an intubation and I want to do, the human thorax model or so that it's probably going to require that the model is very accurate so they can know things to watch for. Or if it's a precision process in industry that they need to know and understand. If it's not of that level of importance, the importance of the asset is not so much that it's accurate, but that it's used as a tool to drive an outcome. And so then you think about that. After realism, what degree of realism do you need? Then you think about the outcome. As a result of completing this learning experience, what should the learner know and be able to do? So at the end of the day, that's the most important piece of everything that we do. All right. So then you think about the asset from the standpoint of its focus. Is it narrow and specific? Is it broad and conceptual? So by narrow and specific, I want to show you the parts of this machine, and I want to make sure that as you work through this experience, you understand the safety rules, you understand the parts, or you're at least familiar with the nomenclature. You're familiar with the overall operational process and all the things that I can build into that. That may need to be a very realistic model. But if it's broad and conceptual, as we've got the examples here in brain learning and humanities, it can be done with theoretical kinds of experiences to do some things. In my past, my background, I ran a project with the University of Kentucky called the Try It program. It was for entering 7th graders, and this was back in 2006 through 2012. And we focused on the brain, the heart, and the mouth. And back in those days, we used a tool called Eon Studio 6, which required some programming and so forth. But in the morning of that program, these students, we had them for 12 weeks, would go work with the doctors in the hospital, and they'd play with Jello brains and really cool stuff. And then in the afternoon, they would come to me and my daughter and others that I'd trained to be trainers to give the students, we gave them a brain model. And their job was to label all the parts of that brain model in 3D and then make some movement happen. So the hippocampus comes out of the screen and comes towards you in solo, and has a pop-up text box and says the hippocampus is responsible for. And that was very successful, and the kids loved it because at the end of it, they presented this in a stereographic, glasses on, 3D presentation to their parents and to their classmates. But what I took away from that was that there's a lot of mashups of learning experiences that occurred in that environment. They first did research working with the doctors to learn about what the hippocampus does, for example. And then they were challenged to take that knowledge about the hippocampus and build that into this application around a brain model in Eon Studio when it was really difficult. You could do the same thing now with the platform in a matter of minutes. Then after they made that presentation, they presented it to their classmates and to others, which was another reinforcement of learning. And so that whole process of mashing things together, doing unique stuff with that model was very exciting. And so did the model need to be exactly accurate? No, it's multicolored. It had lots of different features to it, but it was close enough to where they could identify the parts of the brain and reinforce the learning that they had. So not to go too far off task with that story, but the whole idea of this is, and the whole intent of my discussion on assets is choosing the right model asset, whether it's a 360 or a 3D asset, for the purpose of what you're wanting to have occur in the learning process is extremely important. All right, so next you want to think about the interface. How do you want your students to interact with this learning experience? Should it be simple? So simple, I mean, I'm playing it on the PC, I open up an app and I can see it here on my computer screen. Do I want to do it in augmented reality? Do I want to use an Oculus? Do I want them to do experiences with both where it's blended? Do we want them to do meetings around the object? So what are the outcomes with the delivery? And that's kind of more of an assessment kind of piece. And then lastly, think about the audience of the learners. Are you want to do this as an individual assignment, a group assignment, or in teams? So it takes a little bit of time to dissect all of this and to break it down, but choosing the right asset is the key to whatever it is that you want to build. And the assets, again, can be simple, crazy looking objects to, something that's very specific and detailed. And I've seen an example with Manchester Community College that really intrigued me, in that they do a computer security, network security program. And they created some simple models that were just maybe boxes, lines, and shapes. And each one of those represented a topic of internet security. And so, you had, this is your firewall, this one flowed out, and you had videos and content, audio knowledge, PDFs, and other information on those topics from each one of those. So you can see that you can take a very simple something and build a rather complex, lesson around it. And maybe we'll get the chance to take a look at that before I finish up here. All right, so that's the first thing I want to talk about were assets. The second thing I wanted to talk about, we're using digital twins. And digital twins are the unique process. And I noticed that here in the movie, my videos are not running, so I'll share those in a different way in just a second. But digital twins can be a whole new area of study for students. It's how you can infuse the real world into the digital world. It's how you can send students perhaps on a field trip, and they scan an image, and then they come back and they build a lesson around that image. And a case in point, I just did it myself last night. I worked with the Aviation Museum of Kentucky here, and I'm giving them a proof of concept where we might do some unique things. And I scanned a Northrop Talon aircraft last night, the entire aircraft, and now I brought that scan back, and now I'm putting it into the platform, and I'm going to build some lessons and learning content around that to supplement the user experience at the museum as an idea. And so we're exploring all the things that they could do with that in a museum. And I think that's going to be kind of a fun project to see. But going back to where it could be student-led, it could be an easy way. And as an old technical teacher, I started out teaching woodworking, and one of the things that we always had to teach was how to use a table saw safely, how to use a joiner safely, and so those kind of things. And so what I found was that it's boring. How do you make nuts and bolt types exciting? How do you make screwdriver types exciting? And it's really difficult. But now, if I thought about, and if I were teaching again in that field, that maybe I would give this platform to students with an iPad with a LiDAR scanner. And I say, go out and scan that joiner and build a lesson around that and tell me all the parts and all the safety and all the things to do this. So it becomes that student engaged hands-on experience of learning about equipment. Now, of course, I'm going to grade that. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to facilitate discussion. It's going to go in addition to other things that I need to teach, because safety is safety, right? It's extremely important. But these are hands-on learning experiences that help for design and creating, that are just really powerful means and ways to do that. So I'm going to actually, give me just 1 second here, and I'm going to switch over to another presentation mode, and I'll share with you what I'm talking about, and showing you a quick video snippet. And I'll run this presentation in a different way. All right, so get this minimized a little bit. Bear with me just 1 second and get back onto my webinar. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go over to this side now, and I'm going to share it, and you're going to see the same thing, but hopefully this time I can run my videos as we go forward. So there we go. All right, so in this particular case, I looked at in my shop here at a joiner, and what I'm talking about in using a digital twin experience is that perhaps I send a student out into the lab and I had them scan this object. And it's very easy to do. You edit the scan, you just walk around it with your iPad, and you make this model, and then you export that scan into the platform. And there's multiple ways that you can create content once it's in the platform. You can use AI to find lessons. So I'm creating my digital twin here from that scan. So now you notice that my scan looks just like my real woodworking joiner. That's the name of this machine. I set it to proper scale. And now I align the two items together. And that's just a quick and easy process. Students should have no problem doing this at any grade level. And, get it lined up. And so now we overlay the virtual model over the real model. And then I can begin creating content. So now this is not just me, the instructor, doing it. It is, the student doing the creating. And so that's just one of the quick ways you can pull that together. We used a LiDAR scanner that is in iPad 12 Professional. And I'm understanding that there is a possibility of using photogrammetry to do that as well. So if you notice here in the video, now I've added content using AI. I cut out all of that, but you can see now I went from just teaching about the parts of the joiners, where I have overlaid video that could be me doing my own demonstration, or it could be something that I find online. I use YouTube as a method to share and manage my videos, because it's just really easy. You have to do a link to those unlisted videos. And then the 3D recordings I do, you notice that here in the platform, you have an avatar image that points out the same things that you pointed out when you did your creation. This could be the students doing that same thing as an experience. Below that, I have a second video that shows the same thing. And in this particular case, I want to go here and kind of scroll through just a little bit. So again, another learning experience for students. And this could be arts, sciences, humanities, technical programs. Is you send them to a museum, you send them to a work site, you send them to a hardware store or someplace like that, and have them do the scan and create the learning experience themselves based on what they're able to pull together. So you can come up, I think, with a lot of creative assignments. And what I like to call this is a mashup learning experience. And I gave you the example of what the students did in that Try It program many years ago, where the first reinforcement of learning was they did the research. The second was creating the scan and the presentation in this case. That reinforced the research learning. And then lastly, they present and share that in a spatial meeting with their classmates and you in another experience where they're all walking around this information that they created and consumed. So I'll stop there so I know I'm running a little bit short on time, but you can see that they were building the content to go back. This is using AI to create it. And these same videos are available on the EON YouTube channel, and you can see more examples of that. And hopefully you may have already had a deep dive into how to use the platform. But we can certainly follow up with additional videos and content. All right, so let's move along. And so that's digital twins, team and group activities, quick learning of equipment parts. It's a hands-on experience. It's putting the students' hands on doing something, creative assignments. You can come up with your own number of ideas for how you can do that. And again, it's that mashup learning that will take place. All right, so I'll just stay with this version of the presentation rather than the screen version. And so now let's take a look at the 360 learning experience. And in this particular case, I thought about, often I used to talk about that you can put someone in a high-risk, high-dollar environment without putting them in a high-risk, high-dollar environment for safety's sake. And so we have here this example of a model. And again, about sharing, I just made a link from out of the presentation here, and I'll drag this over into the screen. And this links from out of my PowerPoint directly to this particular lesson, which is going to open up here on the other side. And so I think I left one running earlier, so I've got a duplicate going on here, but let me pull this over. I had two things running at once, and I accidentally, let me close that and we'll try this again. Make sure I'm still on Webinar Jam. Yes, I am. Okay, so now I'm going to view the lesson. Give it a second to open. I think I double clicked. There we go. All right, so now I'm in this 360 learning experience. So what can students learn inside of this environment? And I'll take this up to full screen. So now I'm in the XR platform, and I can see that now I have annotations that are placed in here, and I can learn about different things. Now, when I created this presentation originally, I called it Through the Patient's Eyes. And what I thought about, just this whole different way of using the lesson, was that I thought, let's take a patient through this anesthesia experience. And I think I have a video in here that's a 360 streaming video that will play. And I thought about maybe having the student write a paper. What did they experience? What did they see when they saw this environment take place? I'm permanently running a little slow on the network. But this is a 360 image in an actual surgery, and maybe the student asks, what did the nurse ask? What were the proper procedures that were asked? What did the surgeon ask that walks into the room? And then they kind of walk through this virtual experience, you know, to characterize that. So that's a critical thinking type of exercise that's not really even related to 360, but it's using 360 as a conduit to get them to that process. So as I look back around this environment here, I also can do things like introduce some topics, so I can have an introduction. And so I can share different types of content. I can have them, you know, locate information, and hopefully you've seen a lot of this. But what I'm getting after is that in this same experience, I can put them into an environment that perhaps they can't go to, but and not damage anything or be at risk of causing infections or whatever being in this environment. So this is a great way to use this tool. But now think about this one. If I could give a LiDAR scanner to someone, and they take it out and they do a scan, why couldn't I give them a little 360 camera and have them do some 360 captures of information in their area and in that topic zone? So that's what I'm talking about 360 learning as an experience. It's, again, another engaging exercise. It immerses real world and immersion in workplace locations, for example. It can be independent study and research projects. It can be contextualized environments and learning experiences, and so forth. All right, so that moves from that topic. And now our third one, I'm going to try to pick up my pace here a little bit because I am running short of time. So we want to talk now about student-created assignments. And this particular assignment right here is the way I use this as a capstone project. It can be a multifaceted learning experience to help facilitate more learning. Now, this particular one you're looking at, I was teaching one of the VRIA courses, and for the capstone project, I asked the students to think of their own lesson that they wanted to create, model the content. So the model that you see here was created by the student in this class. This is high level. And they created the model, they created a lesson, and they presented it back to their classmates. So just to give you a quick look at what that looks like, I'll click on the icon here, bring this over, take you to that link, and I'm going to view that lesson. Now, when you do this in an LMS, it's seamless. You can go directly to the lesson or you can go to a screen. So this is what that student created. They built content around this set of devices that they modeled themselves. So this was the student modeling. Of course, we were teaching modeling, so it should be good. And you get the idea of you know how this works. So their capstone project was presented to me as the instructor
via this method of using the platform. So we do use our own tool to provide student experiences. But thinking about student assignments, again, you can do field research at different locations. You can have them create projects from scratch. You can have presentation requirements around what they create as an assignment. You can do spatial meetings where they meet in and around that environment. The back image that you see here that says design brief, that's a tool that I used my whole teaching career. Is that it's almost like a Rube Goldberg competition, if you're familiar with those. But basically you give a scenario of some experience that you need to complete, and then you challenge them to use this tool to create an answer to that solution. So that's another way that we can create a compelling learning experience. All right, so I'm going to continue moving along here, because I do want to talk about the last piece of my discussion, which is the impact design method. And again, this is maybe it's overthinking it, maybe it's underthinking it. You can make your own decision. But when I think about ranking the lessons or experiences that I've created, I want to go back and I want to use this method, and I want to see how many of these feature sets I can integrate into that learning experience. So that means impact, of course, is an acronym. It stands for immersion, modality, performance, access, creativity, and training. Immersion, that's this environment here, where being immersed in this environment, being inside of an airplane cockpit, or in a shop, or in a surgical suite. So an immersion value has a lot of value to bring forward inside of the process. Modality is the means and ways that students can interface with the product, whether they're doing it through an Oculus, whether they're doing it through a lab experience. So we've got this model here in the top center of students learning in a virtual classroom environment, or whether they're doing it just on a computer screen, or whether they're doing it in a spatial meeting, as you see over here. Performance is the level of requirement that they have to be able to identify parts, name parts, complete quizzes, complete activities, share their content. How can I make the performance be at a higher level? Something that I always want to continue doing. Access, that's the most exciting thing about the time we live in now with XR. And one more quick historical story for me. I still share it. I've talked too much about it probably, but around 2008, we created in Kentucky an application on self-contained self-breathing apparatus for underground coal miners. And we built this whole big simulation with the model that exploded, had avatars, lesson plans, instructor guides, interactivity, 5 major steps of training, assessment at the end, even an active, donning process. We won top 3 awards in Mine Health and Safety Administration that year. And I had no users. And the reason I had no users was that I had to give them a CD, if you remember those. And they had to upload a viewer. They had to then find out that, they didn't have a powerful enough video card. And so it was just too difficult. And that's been the problem with a lot of things in VR, AR in the past. But spring forward to today, I could build that lesson in 10 minutes using my tablet, my PC, my phone. And after I finish building that lesson, I can click a share link and I can share it in my PowerPoints you've seen me do. I can share it to my LMS. I can send a direct link to the lesson to students. Students can join me in a meeting. They can open it up immediately in any one of those devices, including an Oculus, and have an experience. So the ability now, I've stayed with it for this long to see that we can actually deliver and can actually do the creative things we come up with. So now the limits are just, finding those ways to put it out there. So access is a major thing that we've overcome. And then creativity and training, I'll roll those two together. The bottom right image here, this is of it in a learning management system. This is that spatial meeting where you're training someone to do some things with a guided lesson kind of process. But the creativity piece, as I mentioned, the escape room that the professor used at Alamo, or using models in different ways, assets in different ways than what they're maybe intended for originally, is where this really becomes fun. You can come up with creative activities and tasks that students complete to help enhance and facilitate their learning. And then that in turn can be used to help train them at higher levels. And then of course the training example here in the middle is just simply using the platform itself, going through all the lesson activities. But think about it. If you have 20 annotations in a lesson, and in all 20 of those annotations, you can add audio, you can add video, you can add a locate function and identify a PDF, an image, a recording. now suddenly you can just build just giant kind of things that we do. The quick question about the scanner is the iPad is an iPad 12 that I'm using, and it does have the LiDAR scanner in it. All right, so I guess I need to keep going here. We've got about 4 minutes left, and I do want to finish up with the comments. So one of the things that I found useful, and I'll share this documentation with you too, is that I could come up with some rubrics. I could look at ratings for myself for the content that I create. I could give it an XR impact score. So I could come up with my own rubric here and score that. Or I could do an XR learning experience for student, and I could make a rubric to score how well they did using impact as a way to see the training that they created or the assignment that they completed. And then lastly, that's just, ways that you can use this yourself. And then finally, just kind of to recap some closing comments, and then I'll try to get to a few questions and we'll wind down. But, I think in closing, the platform itself provides you with a new way to facilitate learning at all levels. It's the power of XR as an instructional aid is only limited by your imagination. You can choose assets for specific reasons or for really wild and different reasons to come up with some unique things. Learning experiences can be as simple or complex as you want them to be. It doesn't have to be something that's always all-encompassing and major and gets to every point. It can be just used to teach one aspect of a bigger lesson, or it could be used to teach an entire lesson on a topic. You, as the instructor, have to decide where that value comes from and what's most important to you and to your students. The platform is a great way to provide hands-on learning experiences in topics that are often difficult to do hands-on with. Give students the tool and let them do the creation. Let them build some content as an assignment. They're not building lessons; they're building the content. Student assignments include multiple opportunities for learning reinforcement, individual group activities, mashups knowledge, and to drive higher levels of learning. Be creative. Think differently. Don't be afraid to fail. If it doesn't work, drop it and try something else. Begin by beginning. Keep moving forward with your XR implementation. And with that, can I jump back to questions? But I'm going to leave you with 4 questions that I like to use that I call a hot wash up. And you can do this on your own. And if you want to share those with me, I would love that too. But first of all, I'd like to ask the question, what did you realize about the problem-finding process that you worked with this? What new insights do you have about our topic? What did you gain from this experience? What did you learn today? And what's your biggest takeaway for you personally from this situation? So I'll leave that at that, and I'll come back here and try to take a question. I'm not sure I understand that question. Let me see here. 3D output for images, videos, 3D objects would be very helpful when that developed for you, at least as an option. Okay, I got you. Like the traditional stereo presentation, stereographic presentation. I think that is a possibility. We may check on that. I think it may just be setting up quad buffering as a license to possibly be able to do that. We'll follow up on that one. If you would mind, I'll try to keep these questions and get back to you on those. Skills better taught experientially. I'm thinking negotiation media. Yeah, I mean, there's some, you have to decide where it fits, so don't assume that just because you have the tools, it's going to be the solution to the problem. You have to find fits and unique ways that you could use this lesson to do an experience type of thing with it, or maybe you don't have a way to do that with it, and that's okay too. Just you have to be creative in how you want to apply it. So medical devices industry question, examples of that. Actually, I've worked on a pilot for a group on how to access and use a device that dispenses medicines and IVs. That's an automated robot system. Is one example you could do. How to maintain and clean a ventilator. How to do an injection, just as a simulation and model, how to set a PICC line, and some of those kind of things are some examples that I've seen in the past. So anyway, I would like to encourage you to think differently about how you use the platform, about what you can do, what you can accomplish, and that don't just look at it as that it's a tool here, it's already created and everything is done for you. Think outside of the box, use an old cliche of how you can use this platform to create some really unique things, share those immediately with your students, put it in the hands of your students, and really let's use it. You know, we have it here. Let's use it. Let's try it. And when it doesn't do what we want, we try something else, because that's just part of using technology. So with that, I've come to the end of my time. We do have a recording being made of today's session. And with that, we'll share that again. I will also put a document up in the resources section that I'm working on that goes along with this, which is this document that will cover a lot of the topics that I've talked about today, but I wanted to just give it to you or make it available in a written format. I've got a few pieces to add to it yet, but you can see some of the things that are here, including some templates that you can maybe use and adapt to create your own lessons. So with that, I will call it a day here with this particular seminar and say thank you for your time. Thank you for being with me. Go do great things. Use this platform in lots of unique ways, and I'm excited to see what may come up in the future. Have an awesome day, evening, weekend, or whatever time of day in the world that you may be. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.